My son came home from baseball practice with 4 fingerprint-shaped bruises on his upper arm, and the coach told him to walk it off. 2 weeks later, at the same field, I made sure every parent in the bleachers heard exactly why the coach really left his last team. Eli was 11, and he pulled his sleeve down the second he saw me looking. I said, "Show me." He said, "It's nothing, Dad." I said, "Eli." He lifted the sleeve, and there were 4 marks in a row, and a 5th one on the other side like a hand. I asked who did it. He said, "Coach Merrick grabbed me because I wasn't hustling." I asked what Merrick said after. Eli said he told me to walk it off and not to be a baby about it. I called the league that night. The rec director, a guy named Paul, told me Merrick had cleared a background check and that boys get bruises. I said, "Not shaped like fingers." Paul said, "Let's not do this over a rough practice." So I did it myself. I found Merrick's last team from 3 towns over on an old roster page, and I started calling parents. 9 numbers. The first 6 didn't pick up. The 7th was a woman named Dana, and when I said the name Merrick, she went quiet for so long I thought the call dropped. Then she said, "Who is this?" I told her. She said, "Is your son on his team?" "Yes." She said, "Take him off tonight." I asked what happened. She said, "He signed something." I signed something too. I can't talk about it. I said, "My kid has a handprint on his arm." She said, "Then you already know more than we were allowed to say." I asked her one question. "Did he ever get physical with a kid?" She said, "That's not why he left." That stopped me cold. I said, "Then why did he leave?" She said, "Look up an obituary. October. A boy named Tommy Hale." And she hung up. I found it in 2 minutes. Tommy Hale, 12 years old, died on a Saturday in October. Sudden cardiac event during a game. The obituary had a photo of a kid in a jersey holding a bat. I called Dana back 9 times. She answered the 9th. I said, "It says cardiac event." She said, "Tommy told Merrick he couldn't breathe." In the 3rd inning, Merrick told him to walk it off and put him back out at shortstop. Tommy went down between 2nd and 3rd, and Merrick stood in the dugout for 40 seconds telling him to get up before anyone called 911. I couldn't say anything. She said, "The league settled with the Hales. Everyone signed." Merrick was never charged because the coroner called it natural, so he just left and coached somewhere else. 2 weeks later, I sat in the bleachers at Eli's game with my phone in my hand and Dana on speaker at low volume, and I waited. Merrick was in the third base coach's box. Bottom of the 2nd, a kid named Owen took a bad hop off the shin and went down. Merrick clapped twice and yelled it. "Walk it off, Owen. Let's go." I stood up and I turned around to face the bleachers and I said it loud. "Ask him who Tommy Hale was." Merrick's head snapped toward me. 30 parents turned. Paul, the rec director, stood up in the 2nd row and said, "Sir, sit down." I held up the phone. I said, "Dana, say your son's name." And out of the speaker, over a Little League field on a Tuesday at 6 p.m., a woman's voice said, "My son was Tommy Hale. He was 12. He told Coach Merrick he couldn't breathe, and Coach Merrick told him to walk it off, and my son died 60 feet from that man while he stood there telling him to get up." Nobody moved. A mom 2 rows down covered her mouth. Merrick came off the 3rd base line fast, saying, "That is a lie. That is a settled matter. That woman signed up," and he stopped himself right there in front of everyone. Because the only way you know a thing is settled is if you settled it. Paul sat back down very slowly. Dana's voice came out of the phone again. "Say his name, Merrick." Merrick looked at the bleachers. He looked at the kids on the field, and every one of them was standing still in the grass watching him. He said, "Tommy Hale." Then a dad in a windbreaker in the front row stood up and said, "That's my nephew's name. Tommy Hale is my sister's kid." And he took Merrick by the collar of his polo, and Merrick went down onto the chalk of the 3rd base line, and nobody in those bleachers moved an inch to help him. Eli walked in from the outfield and stood over him and pulled his sleeve up and showed him the 4 marks, and he said the only thing anyone said to Merrick after that: "Walk it off."